Sup, guys? This is starting to get a bit ridiculous. Two straight baseball side losers lose with the team winning by multiple runs going into the bottom of the eighth. And that was the case with Seattle last night. I think they were up 3-1, bottom of the eighth, and they wound up losing 4-3 on a walk-off. Just ridiculous. Wu actually only wound up going 3 innings in the game. I'm not really sure why that was the case. I don't know if he got injured or what, but his pitch count wasn't really that high. He wasn't giving anything up, really, so I'm not sure what happened there, but that may have impacted Seattle's bullpen performance. Whatever. We move on to today. I'm going to have 3 plays today. I'm going a little bit crazy. Let's just get into it. I'm going over in Toronto, Boston, my Red Sox. I think this starting pitching matchup is conducive to it. I think both of these starting pitchers are kind of seen as like kind of better pitchers in these rotations, but they have kind of been struggling this year. But also they have bad numbers against these opposing lineups here. So this is Gausman at Bello. This line is up from 8.5 juice to the over at -120 up to 9. You can get the over 9 at, I think, less than -110 right now, or maybe right around -110. I'm going to do it, even though both bullpens didn't really get used that much yesterday, and it was a high-scoring game. I mean, both of these offenses can do damage. They can continue to do damage. Both bullpens are, well, the Red Sox bullpen is actually not that bad. Toronto's, I think, maybe a little bit worse than that. But the starting pitching matchup, I think, is where you get a lot of this. Although I tend to not like first 5 inning totals. I tend to just go full game on it. Gausman for Toronto, he's got a 4.24 ERA now, so that has been going down. He's been pitching a bit better, which I think you expect based on his career numbers. He wasn't going to continue to pitch as horribly as he has been, but still has a 1.29 ERA, or 1.29 whip, And, he's still kind of been struggling and giving up some runs, and he just faced the Red Sox in his last outing. So that's a key part of this too. The Red Sox were already pretty familiar with him. I mean, he's in their division, but they just saw him, and he didn't do very well in that game either. And now they're turning around and they get to face him again. As I say, hitters tend to have an advantage against a pitcher when they just saw him. And that's going to be the case with Gausman, who didn't pitch well against the Red Sox in his last start. And I think that was Gausman and Bello both going in that game. So the same starting pitching matchup in Toronto. So we've seen situations like this recently in baseball where the same 2 teams are up against each other again. You have the exact same pitching matchup. And I think that pitcher having to face that same lineup almost immediately again becomes a disadvantage for the pitcher. Gausman also career against the Red Sox. We have a big sample size here. It's not very good. The Red Sox are 31 for 101 off him with 10 doubles, 3 home runs, 15 RBIs, a 25-10 strikeout walk ratio. So that walk number is high too. That's a 307 batting average and 864 OPS. So the Red Sox have done pretty well against Gausman in their careers. And then on the other side, Brayan Bello, his numbers suck this year. 4.83 ERA, 1.41 whip. He's not really turning into the pitcher that the Red Sox hoped that he would be. Although he's been facing some difficult lineups this season. He's kind of been struggling. Just very mediocre at best, I would say. That whip is actually on the pretty bad side. 18-11 strikeout walk ratio in the month of June. Over the course of the season, it's not really much better. And against Toronto, well, he just faced Toronto. He actually had a decent game the last time out and went 6 innings, 2 walks, 7 hits. So he still kind of put too many men on base in that one. Struck out 6, that's fine, and got away with only allowing 2 earned runs. But Toronto now just saw him again. They've faced him a bunch, and typically they've hit him pretty well. That last outing that he just had against Toronto was probably the best one that he's had against Toronto based on the career stats that he has against these guys, because they're not good. And Toronto, just like I said with the Red Sox lineup, they're coming around and facing this same pitcher that they just saw in his last start. So it tends to be a disadvantage for the pitcher. Bello against this current Toronto lineup, they're 28 for 78 off him lifetime with 7 doubles, 2 home runs, 13 RBIs. 18-6 strikeout walk ratio isn't that bad for Bello, but it's a 359 batting average and 930 OPS. So bad numbers there. Both starters struggle against these lineups. Taking that one over the total. And I'm also going with an over in an interleague game, which I tend to not do, but I think this one calls for it. It's kind of similar in the pitching matchup. I think this is conducive to an over, even though we've seen the line tick down a little bit, actually, in Texas, Milwaukee, from 9 juice to the under at minus 115 to 9 juice to the under at minus 118. But we do see 80% of the tickets on the over, but 85% of the cash on the over. So we do still see more of the cash than the tickets, even though the over is public. And by the way, in the Toronto and Boston game, I don't think we can really see much going on there at the moment with these numbers the pregame has. I don't think they're fully formed yet, really. I don't think we have enough information, but that Toronto-Boston game says we have 91% of the tickets on the over and 100% of the cash on the over. So I don't think that's accurate. I don't think we can take that much away from these numbers or these percentages that we see right now. I'm just looking at the matchups, man. In Milwaukee, they won yesterday 6-3. So again, both of these teams had somewhat high-scoring games yesterday. Or all of these teams, I should say, but I still think this is a decent way to go. Texas didn't use that much of their bullpen yesterday, really. Hernandez came in and really kind of ate up the rest of what the bullpen needed to do. But besides him, they used 2 other relievers, and Milwaukee used 4 relievers, and they used 3 of their best relievers. So Milwaukee, some of their better bullpen arms all came out and played in the game yesterday, so might be unavailable today. So I think it's looking not that great for Texas and Milwaukee here as far as these pitchers are concerned. And then, of course, we look at the starting pitching matchup. Andrew Heaney is pitching for Texas. He hasn't been that great this year. 4.21 ERA, 1.29 whip. Those numbers aren't great. Although he's pitched pretty well this month, but he's faced some kind of bad lineups like Miami and San Francisco. Their offense isn't good. Seattle, I don't know if Seattle's that great. They're okay, but he didn't do that well in that game either. He gave up 3 earned runs in each of his last 3, and then also against the Mets. He's not going that deep into games, really. So he's getting taken out, even though his strikeout walk ratio isn't that bad this year, 71-20 and 72 2/3. He's allowed 74 hits, so he's kind of allowed too many hits, too many home runs. His whip is too high, putting almost 1.3 base runners on per inning. And then we look at his numbers against this pretty difficult Milwaukee lineup. Milwaukee has hit him pretty well in an okay sample size. 15 for 41 with 3 doubles, 3 home runs, 6 RBIs. Does have an 11-2 strikeout walk ratio against him, but it's a 366 batting average and 1,045 OPS. So Heaney, not that great a pitcher, really, just pretty mediocre. And his stats against Milwaukee, not good. And then on the other side, Bryce Wilson, he's a guy I've talked about a bit. I found him difficult to figure out, but now I think we see him having that regression that I said was probably going to happen because he's a guy who's like a converted reliever, even though he's still young, 26. I just haven't been impressed with his numbers, really. Now we're starting to see him regress a bit as he's had a couple of bad starts in his last few outings. He's not going deep into games either, so Milwaukee probably is going to have to start rolling out their bullpen. He's gone below 5 innings in a kind of a concerning amount of his starts. He's just not a guy that comes in and really he's not a guy that goes like really, really deep into games and just comes in and dominates. I mean, overall in the season, 55-26 strikeout walk ratio. That's not good in 68 innings, only allowing 62 hits, but that number is kind of starting to go up a little bit too, I think. The number of walks is too high, and he's not coming in and striking guys out. So we're starting to see him regress a bit. He's got a 4.24 ERA, 1.29 whip. And against the Texas Rangers, we don't have a huge sample size here, but they've hit him all right. 6 for 20 with 2 doubles, no home runs, 2 RBIs, 4-2 strikeout walk ratio. It's a 300 average and 764 OPS. So I don't trust either of these starting pitchers, really. I'm taking that one over the total as well. Maybe I'm getting a little bit, maybe I'm not being selective enough here. Maybe I'm getting a little bit crazy just because I haven't done well recently, but I'm also going to play a side. I'm going to go full game run line just because I think when you have a team that's just a huge favorite like Kansas City is, I'm playing Kansas City. I think this is a big pitching mismatch. I'm just going full game on it, even though Kansas City did use a couple of their better relievers yesterday. When you're laying a run line, you want to go full game on it. And that's what I'm going to do here with Kansas City against Miami. Kansas City is actually down from minus 218 to minus 195. So maybe we can get a little bit of better value on Kansas City here. 59% of the tickets on them, but 92% of the cash. So it looks like conflicting indicators there because the lines moved down, but that cash discrepancy looks fairly heavily on Kansas City. And I think that might be the better indicator here. Kansas City returned from a road trip playing last night, and they still won against Miami because this Miami team is pretty weak. So they're not going to be in one of those spots where they came back home, did badly in that distracted spot, and now they're in a bounce back spot. But I do think they're the better team. They've fallen behind Minnesota, so now they're in this battle. And yeah, I've been saying I don't think Kansas City is as good as their hot start would make you believe, but I don't think they're as bad as their recent play either. And they came out of a tough Dodger series and then didn't play that well against Oakland. So maybe they were hung over from playing the Yankees and the Dodgers. They've been playing some pretty good teams here, man, in the stretch. And then they played Texas, who I don't think is that bad either. Now they get a Miami team that's Miami. It's a step down in class for Kansas City, man. Miami, not a very good team. Miami's got Yanni Chirinos pitching, and I don't trust him. He's 30 years old. He made one start this year. Miami, I think they must have some injuries or something, had a spot to fill in their rotation. They had to bring him up. He did fine in that game against St. Louis, who's not the best hitting team, really. Kansas City, I think, maybe a little bit better offensively. He pitched pretty well in that one, kind of, but he put too many men on base. He gave up 8 hits in 5 innings, so that's not good, even though he had a 6.0 strikeout walk ratio and got out only allowing 2 earned runs. It still amounted to him having a 1.6 whip because he gave up so many hits in that game. And a 3.6 ERA doesn't look that bad, but his stats overall in his career are just very middle of the road. He was on Tampa for a while starting in 2018. Then he went to Atlanta and really struggled in limited playing time in Atlanta. So he's kind of struggled pitching in this NL East from what we can see as well. His career stats, he just walks way too many guys, he walks too many guys, I should say. Doesn't strike out a lot of guys. 264 to 85 strikeout walk ratio and 331 and a third innings in his career. So he walks too many, which he didn't do in his first start this season. But historically, he puts too many men on base for a 1.21 whip, which isn't actually that bad. But the walk number is kind of high. He doesn't come in and strike guys out. 4.02 career ERA. Not that horrible either. He had a couple of okay seasons with Tampa, but I still don't trust him. And up against Kansas City, they've actually seen him a decent amount, and they've done okay against him. 7 for 28 lifetime with a double, 3 home runs, 8 RBIs, a 3.2 strikeout walk ratio. So they've hit him for a 250 batting average, but also a 907 OPS, so a pretty high OPS. So they've been able to hit Chirinos all right. And then on the other side, Seth Lugo. I think we got a mismatch here, man, with Seth Lugo. I mean, he is the better of these two pitchers here. Excuse me, let me see here. Seth Lugo, even though I think that he's overperforming this year with a 2.42 ERA and 1.07 whip at the age of 34, I don't think he can keep this up. With an 87-24 strikeout walk ratio, that's a good ratio, too. It shows you he has command, even though it's in 104 innings pitched. So he doesn't come in and strike out a lot of guys, but he's still limiting the damage quite a bit. And he's only allowed 87 hits. But looking at his stats here, he's only allowed more than 2 earned runs in 3 starts. And he hasn't allowed more than 5, and that was against Cleveland. He had back-to-back starts where he allowed 5 and 4, but that was against Cleveland and the Yankees. So against a couple of decent lineups. Then the other time he allowed 4 runs was against Baltimore. So he's done pretty well against the offenses that he's supposed to do well against. He's just had some of his worst outings against some of the better lineups, which Miami is not one of them. So he's pitching pretty well this season, man, overall. Not allowing a lot of hits, not really walking a lot of guys, just the strikeout number. He doesn't blow people away. You don't usually see this kind of turnaround from a guy who's in his mid-30s, but the last couple seasons, his ERA or his numbers actually weren't that bad. But with the Mets, he was coming out of the bullpen, and then he started with San Diego last year, and he actually had a decent season there, and his strikeout rate was actually better last year. So I don't think that all of his numbers are a mirage here, really. And against this weak Miami lineup, 6 of their hitters have seen him before, and he has dominated them. They're 2 for 31 off him with no extra base hits, 11 strikeouts, 2 walks. That's an 0.65 batting average and 186 OPS. So I think this is a mismatch, man. Lugo dominates these Miami hitters. Whereas, who is he up against? I don't even remember. Chirinos has not very good numbers against these Kansas City hitters. And Lugo is the more trustworthy overall pitcher and can go deeper into games. So that's going to be Kansas City -1.5 on the run line, which you can get at -102. So it's going to be that, and it's going to be over 9 in Toronto, Boston, and that's at -110, and over 9 Texas, Milwaukee at -105. Got to start turning this around again, man. This is a bad downswing. I don't want to have a losing year for the first time in almost a decade. Let's turn it around, man. Let's go. Peace.